Black dress was still on when Miles walked through the door. Nora Calloway hadn't even had time to reach for the zipper. She'd been standing at the bathroom mirror in the guest suite of the West Haven Country Club, the same room where she'd helped Margaret Holt get dressed 6 hours earlier before her mother-in-law's world went dark and still and permanent. The funeral had run long. The reception had run longer. Nora's feet ached in a way that went deeper than shoes. She heard Miles before she saw him, the heavy, purposeful stride that meant something had shifted in his world. Not grief. She knew his grief walk. This was different. He came through the door still adjusting his cufflinks. Didn't look at her. Looked at the window. "The reading happened," he said. "Hayes pulled me aside after the guests cleared." Nora turned from the mirror. "I thought it wasn't until Thursday. He moved it up. Wanted to give me the highlights privately." Miles finally looked at her, and something in his face made her stomach drop before a single word came out. His eyes had that quality she'd noticed creeping in over the past year, bright, calculating, stripped of warmth. Like someone had taken her husband and replaced him with a very convincing copy. "Mom left everything to me. The estate in Connecticut, the Asheville house, the investment portfolio, the foundation assets." He paused, letting the number form in his mouth like he was tasting it. 4.2 million in liquid accounts alone. Probably double that once the properties settle. Nora waited. She knew how to wait. 12 years of marriage to a man who processed things in layers had taught her that. "There's something else," Miles said. He crossed to the minibar, poured 2 fingers of scotch he didn't offer to share. "Mom left you something." Hayes mentioned it. Her heart did a small, cautious lift. Margaret had loved her. Genuinely loved her, in the way some mothers-in-law love a daughter-in-law better than they love their own children because they chose her without obligation. They'd spent Sunday mornings together when Miles slept in. They'd driven to Asheville without him the previous fall just to see the leaves turn and eat at a place with no menu. Margaret had once told Nora quietly over chamomile tea, "You are the best decision my son ever made, and I'm not sure he knows it." "What did she leave me?" Nora asked. "A letter." Miles drank. "In an envelope. Hayes will have it at his office tomorrow." The room felt smaller. "That's it. That's it." There was something in the way he said it, almost satisfied, like a door clicking shut. "I mean, Mom always had a soft spot for sentiment. Probably her recipes in there or something." Nora looked at her husband's profile. She'd loved that profile once. The strong jaw, the careful posture his mother had given him, the way he'd seemed like someone who would always stand steady. 12 years. She'd left a job at a design firm in Portland to move to his city. She'd learned to love his complicated family. She'd held Margaret's hand through 2 rounds of chemotherapy and never once counted it as a favor owed. "Miles," she said carefully, "are you okay?" He turned, and for just a moment she thought she saw him, the real him, flicker behind his eyes. Then it was gone. "I think," he said, setting down the glass, "that we should talk about some things. About what this money means. But the kind of life I've been wanting to build." He moved toward the door. "But not tonight. Tonight we have guests downstairs." He left without touching her. Nora stood very still in her black dress and listened to the reception noise filtering up through the floor. Laughter, clinking glasses, someone telling a story about Margaret that was making people cry in the good way. Down there, people were celebrating a woman who had lived fully and loved generously. Up here, her son was already calculating what came next. Nora found her way back downstairs. She smiled at the right people and said the right things and accepted a dozen condolences she actually felt. And when Miles caught her eye across the room from where he was standing with his fraternity friends, men who had always made her feel like an afterthought, she smiled at him too. He looked away first. The letter. Whatever Margaret had put in that envelope, Nora would get it tomorrow. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was recipes and memories and a handwritten note that would make her cry for a week. Maybe that was all she had left. She had no idea that what was waiting in that envelope would turn everything upside down. But Attorney Philip Hayes' office sat on the 14th floor of a building in downtown Hartford that smelled permanently of cedar and old money. He had represented Margaret Holt's estate for 30 years and wore it the way certain men wear their age, not apologetically but with deliberate weight. Nora arrived at 9. She hadn't slept. Miles had come back to the hotel room at midnight and fallen asleep with his back to her, which told her everything she needed to know about the conversation she hadn't yet had the courage to start. "Mrs. Webb, Calloway." Philip Hayes stood when she came in, and the kindness in his expression almost broke her before she'd even sat down. "Thank you for coming. I know this has been an exhausting few days. I'm managing. She sat. Her hands were folded in her lap over her purse. 12 years of being fine in other people's offices had made her very good at folding her hands. Hayes opened his desk drawer and placed an envelope in front of her. It was cream-colored, the good stationery Margaret had kept in the roll-top desk in her study. Nora's name was written across the front in Margaret's narrow, elegant script. Beneath it, underlined twice, for Nora only. To be opened, in private. Margaret brought this to me 4 months ago, Hayes said quietly. Right after her last oncology appointment. She was very specific that it be given to you separately, not during the estate reading, not in front of Miles. He paused. She said you would understand why. Nora looked at the envelope. Did she tell you what was in it? Not exactly. But she told me this. Hayes leaned forward, folding his hands on the desk. She said, Philip, my son is going to change when the money lands. He's been waiting for it his whole life, and he doesn't even realize what that waiting has done to him. Nora is going to need something solid to stand on when it happens. Make sure she has it. The air went out of the room. Nora reached for the envelope with hands that weren't quite steady. Hayes stood and moved to the window. The same instinct to give privacy that good people have in moments like this, and the door clicked softly behind him. She sat alone with her mother-in-law's handwriting in the faint smell of cedar and the particular silence of a room where important things happen. She opened it. Inside was a folded letter and something else, something flat and plastic that she almost dropped because her fingers had started shaking before she registered what it was. A bank card, her name embossed on the front, Nora Ann Calloway. She unfolded the letter. My dearest Nora, if you're reading this, then Philip kept his promise, which means I'm gone, which means Miles has already started showing you who he becomes when he doesn't have to try anymore. I'm sorry. I raised him better than this, or I tried to. Some things are stronger than raising. I've been watching my son for a long time. I've watched him take you for granted in small ways that add up to something large. I've watched him let you carry the weight of this family, the appointments, the phone calls, the dinners, the relationships, without ever saying thank you in any way that counted. I thought he'd grow into gratitude. I was wrong. So I made plans. 3 years ago, I opened an account in your name alone. I have been adding to it from my personal investment portfolio, assets Miles knew nothing about because they were mine before I married his father, and they remained mine throughout. The money is legal. The gift is documented. The taxes are paid. The current balance is $2.9 million. The letter dropped from her fingers. Nora sat very still, looking at it on the floor, and then picked it up because her mother-in-law had written it by hand and deserved better than the floor. She read the number again, then again. I know it's a shock, sweetheart. I know you're probably thinking it's too much, or that I've made a mistake, or that you don't deserve it. You do. You have always deserved more than you asked for. You drove me to every radiation appointment when Miles said he had work he couldn't leave. You researched my medications when the doctors confused me. You were the one who held my hand when I was most afraid, and you never once made me feel like a burden. This money is yours, not Miles's, not the marriage's, yours alone. But Nora, please listen. Don't tell him yet. Get yourself in order first. Find a lawyer. Protect yourself legally. Figure out what you want. And when you're ready, truly ready, you can decide what comes next. You are stronger than you know. You have always been stronger than you know. And you are loved. More than I had time to tell you often enough. All my love. Margaret. Nora cried in that office the way she hadn't let herself cry at the funeral. Ugly, shaking sobs that she pressed into her hand so Philip Hayes wouldn't hear her through the door. Margaret had known. She had seen everything, planned everything, and still managed to protect Nora without Nora ever asking. When she finally composed herself and called him back in, Philip sat down with the folder already open. 2.9, she said, because she had to say it out loud to believe it. 2.94, with interest accrued since the account was established. He slid the folder toward her. It's entirely yours, free and clear. Margaret established this gift with proper documentation years before her passing. Miles has no legal claim to it. It doesn't appear in the estate. How did she keep it from him? Margaret was a remarkably private woman when she needed to be. These were assets from her family's trust, predating her marriage to Gerald. Miles inherited Gerald's money. Margaret's money was always hers to do with as she chose. Philip allowed a small, careful smile. She chose carefully. Nora stared at the bank card. Such a plain, ordinary object for something that had just rearranged her entire future. What do I do now? Now you take time. You process this. You don't tell Miles yet. Margaret's letter was right about that. You find a divorce attorney if that's the direction you're moving. You get yourself positioned. Philip closed the folder. Margaret left a list. Attorneys she trusted, a financial advisor named Lewis Carver, who already has your file. She thought of everything. Of course she did, Nora thought. That's what the people who actually love you do. She left with the envelope in her bag, the bank card in her wallet, and the letter folded against her heart. Miles had no idea that his mother's final act had been to make sure Nora would never need anything from him again. When Nora got back to the house, Miles's mother's house, which was now Miles's house, which he had already begun discussing with an interior designer over a phone call she'd overheard that morning, she found 3 things she hadn't expected. The first was that the reading chairs from Margaret's study had been moved to the garage. The second was that a woman named Colette was standing in the kitchen. Not a decorator, not a neighbor bringing a casserole. Nora knew the difference between professional presence and personal ease, and Colette moved through Margaret's kitchen with the particular comfort of someone who had been there before. She was 30, maybe 32, with the kind of careful prettiness that takes real effort and reads as effortless. "Oh," Colette said when Nora walked in. "Just that." "Oh." Miles appeared from the dining room looking exactly as caught as he should have looked and choosing not to. "Janet, this is Colette Marsh. She's a property consultant. She's helping me assess the estate assets." "Property consultants don't usually open other people's refrigerators," Nora said. Silence. Then, "Nora," Miles said. "Not Janet," she noted, just her actual name delivered like a correction. "Colette is a friend. She's been helping me think through some decisions. Some decisions. How long does it take a marriage to end?" Nora had always assumed it was a moment, a conversation, a confession, a door slamming. But standing in Margaret's kitchen looking at her husband and the woman who moved like she owned the space, she understood it had already been over for a while. She just hadn't been told yet. "I see," she said. "I'll be upstairs." She went to the guest room. She was already in the guest room, had moved there 2 days ago out of some instinct she hadn't questioned, and she called her closest friend. Priya Matheson answered on the second ring, the way she had always answered since they'd met in a pottery class 11 years ago and discovered they lived 4 blocks apart and had the same opinion about bad wine and honest conversation. "Tell me," Priya said. She didn't ask if Nora was okay. She never wasted time on that. So Nora told her. All of it, the envelope, the number, Margaret's letter, Colette in the kitchen, the reading chairs in the garage like they were something to be cleared away rather than remembered. Priya was quiet for exactly 5 seconds. "Okay," she said. "I'm coming." She arrived 40 minutes later with 2 bottles of good red wine and the specific look of someone who has already made a decision and is waiting for you to make it too. They sat in the guest room with the door closed and Priya listened to everything twice and then said very clearly, "You are going to be fine. But we need to move fast." "I know. Have you called a lawyer?" "Margaret already made a list." Priya's expression shifted into something that looked almost like grief. "God, I love that woman." "Me too." "Okay, first thing tomorrow. Lawyer, then bank." Priya poured more wine. "And Nora, don't tell Miles about the money. Not yet, not until you're standing on solid ground." "I know." She did know. Margaret had told her, Philip had told her. Her own instincts were telling her, don't show your hand until you have to. "What about the house? Are you safe here?" Nora thought about it. Miles wasn't volatile. He was cold, which was its own kind of danger, but not the dangerous kind that required her to leave immediately. "I'm okay. I just need time." "Then take it," quietly. Priya raised her glass to Margaret Holt, the smartest woman in any room she ever walked into. Nora raised hers to Margaret. They drank, and for the first time in 3 days, Nora felt something other than loss. The lawyer Margaret had recommended was named Diane Okonkwo, and she operated out of an office in West Hartford that looked like it had been designed specifically to make women feel capable. Clean lines, good light, no clutter. Diane listened to everything without interrupting. When Nora finished, Diane put down her pen and said, "He already has a girlfriend." "I believe so. Annie's been staying in the marital home with her present day after his mother's funeral, 2 days after." Diane wrote something down with the focused energy of someone who enjoys her work. "Here's what we're going to do. We're going to file for divorce on grounds of adultery, which Connecticut absolutely recognizes. We're going to request an equitable division of the marital estate, which will not include your inheritance because it was a gift from a third party and properly documented. We're going to establish primary residence for any minor children, She looked up. Children? No, we don't have children. Diane nodded. Then this is cleaner. Longer in terms of asset division, but cleaner. She slid a legal pad across. Tell me about his financial behavior in the last 6 months. They spent 2 hours going through everything. The credit card statements for restaurants Nora had never been to. The new watch Miles had produced from somewhere in the weeks before his mother died, when he'd been telling Nora they needed to be careful with spending. The text messages to Colette that Nora had seen the preview of on his unlocked phone that morning, not explicit, but unmistakably intimate. Can't wait until this is handled. You deserve so much more than the margins of my life. Diane photographed everything Nora could show her and made a list of everything else to gather. When do you want to file? She asked at the end. Nora thought. Miles was planning to host a dinner at the country club next weekend, his first appearance as the official heir of the Holt estate, a kind of social debut that made her stomach turn every time she thought about it. He'd mentioned it casually, the way he mentioned things he'd already decided without her. After the dinner, Nora said slowly, file Monday. Diane's eyes sharpened with professional interest. Are you planning to attend? Margaret was a member of that club for 40 years. She put my name on her permanent guest list 6 years ago. I have as much right to be there as anyone. Nora looked at her steadily. And I think I'd like to be there. Diane smiled. It was not a warm smile. It was the smile of someone who respects a well-placed move. Monday it is. The dinner was black tie held in the main hall of the West Haven Country Club, with the kind of floral arrangements that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Nora wore a dress she'd bought 17 years ago before she ever met Miles, dark green silk that she'd kept because it made her feel like herself, and that she hadn't worn in years because somewhere along the way she'd started dressing for someone else's preferences. Priya came with her. She wore cobalt blue and walked into that club like she'd grown up there, which she absolutely had not, and which made Nora love her completely. Miles was already inside when they arrived. He'd come early. He was holding court near the bar with a group of men Nora recognized from the kind of events Margaret had hosted out of obligation, not affection. Men who collected connections the way other people collect debt. Colette was at his side, quieter than she'd been in the kitchen, reading the room. The woman checking names at the door looked up when Nora approached. Nora Calloway, she said. I'm a guest of Margaret Holt. The woman's face went soft immediately. Oh, Mrs. Calloway, we are all just heartbroken about Margaret. She was the heart of this place, truly. She made a note. You're on her permanent list. You're always welcome here. Nora thanked her and walked through. It took Miles 40 seconds to spot her. She watched his expression move through 3 phases in rapid succession: surprise, irritation, calculation, and then resolve into the smooth social surface he wore in public. He crossed the room with Colette slightly behind him. Nora, I didn't know you were coming. His voice was controlled but carried an edge only she could hear. I didn't know I needed to inform you. His jaw tightened. This is important to me. I'm being introduced as Margaret's son, Nora said pleasantly. I know. Margaret was important to me too. I think she'd want me here. Colette, to her credit, said nothing. Before Miles could respond, a hand came down warmly on Nora's shoulder. Nora Calloway. She turned to find Walter Ashby, who had chaired the club's charitable foundation since before she'd known Margaret's last name, looking at her with real warmth. I am so glad you're here. Margaret would have wanted nothing less. Thank you, Walter. She talked about you constantly, you know. Every foundation meeting, every planning session. Nora would love this, she'd say. Ask Nora. You were her person. His eyes moved briefly to Miles and registered something. Not unkind, but clear. I hope you'll stay involved with the foundation work. Margaret started several initiatives she cared very much about. I'd be honored, Nora said. Walter squeezed her shoulder and moved on. Miles said nothing. His face had gone a particular shade of red that only happened when something had not gone according to his plan. For the rest of the evening, Nora moved through the room the way she had learned to move through Margaret's world, not performing, just present. She talked to people who remembered her from foundation dinners and charity drives and the years of quiet work that never made headlines but added up to something real. She listened to stories about Margaret and laughed at the right places and cried a little at one that caught her off guard, and people responded to her the way they had always responded to Margaret, with genuine warmth, with welcome. Miles, meanwhile, was struggling. The stories he was telling about the estate landed flat. The people whose respect he wanted most were the ones who kept gravitating away from him and toward the woman he'd decided to discard. Colette was doing her best but kept looking at Nora with an expression that was harder to read. Near the end of the evening, Nora excused herself. In the quiet hallway near the restrooms, she almost walked into Colette. They stood looking at each other. "I'm not going to make a scene," Nora said first. "I didn't think you would." Colette's voice was different than it had been in the kitchen. Smaller. "You're not that kind of person." "What kind of person am I?" Colette was quiet for a moment. "The kind who shows up. The kind people actually remember." She looked away. "The kind I told myself I was before." Nora looked at her. "How long?" 8 months. The answer came quickly, which meant she'd been waiting to say it. "I want you to know he told me you two were basically over, that it had been over for years." "It wasn't. I know that now." Colette's throat moved. "I watched you tonight. I watched those people. People Miles has been trying to impress for months. I watched them treat you like you belonged there, not because of him. Because of him. Because of you. Because of who you are." Nora didn't respond. "I ended it this afternoon," Colette said. "Before dinner. He doesn't know I'm telling you this." She hesitated. "Is there anything I can do to make this right?" Nora thought of Diane Okonkwo's list of things to document. "If he contacts you, if he asks you to say anything in front of a lawyer or anyone else, will you tell the truth?" "Yes." No hesitation. "Then that's enough." She walked back into the main hall and found Priya holding 2 glasses of champagne and wearing the expression of someone who had been watching everything from a strategic distance. "What did she say?" Priya murmured. "That she ended it this afternoon." Priya's eyebrows went up. Then she handed Nora a glass. "To Margaret," she said again. "To Margaret," Nora agreed. Monday morning, Diane Okonkwo filed the paperwork. By noon, Miles's phone was ringing with calls from his attorney. By 2 in the afternoon, Miles himself was standing in the kitchen doorway of the house that had been his mother's, looking at Nora like he was seeing her for the first time. "You hired Diane Okonkwo," he said. "I did. She's the most aggressive divorce attorney in Hartford." "I've heard that." His eyes narrowed. "Janet, you're overreacting. We can handle this ourselves. We don't need lawyers turning something simple into a battle." "I don't think it's simple," Nora said. "I think you were planning to divorce me from the moment the will was read. You just decided on the terms without asking me." He started to speak and then stopped. Some version of the truth had apparently found a way through. "The money Mom left you," he said. "Whatever it was, a letter, some savings, we should talk about it. If she left you something significant, that could affect the settlement." Nora looked at him evenly. "Whatever Margaret left me was a gift made to me personally. Your attorney can speak to Diane about what that means legally." Miles's expression changed. "How much did she leave you?" "Enough," Nora said. "Enough that your settlement offer is going to need significant revision." The color drained from his face. "She wouldn't have. There wasn't. I knew everything about her finances." "You knew what she needed you to know." Nora picked up her bag. "She was smarter than you gave her credit for, Miles. She loved you, but she knew you." She left him standing in the kitchen with that and drove to Lewis Carver's office to begin understanding what $2.9 million and careful management could actually build. The divorce took 4 months. Miles contested several items, pushed back on the asset division, made threats through his attorney that Diane deflected with the practiced ease of someone who had seen every version of this before. When Miles's lawyers tried to claim Nora's inheritance should be considered marital property, Diane produced Margaret's documentation, 3 years of clean paper trail, properly filed gift taxes, an airtight legal record, and the argument died in a conference room on a Tuesday afternoon. Colette testified at the deposition, briefly and factually. Yes, the relationship had been ongoing. Yes, Miles had characterized his marriage as finished before it legally was. Yes, she had documentation. Miles did not take this well. His attorney billed him considerably more after that. Nora, for her part, spent those 4 months building. Lewis Carver was everything Philip Hayes had promised. Methodical, brilliant in a quiet way, genuinely interested in what Nora wanted the money to do rather than just how to protect it. They talked about investing in the kind of organizations Margaret had loved, the ones that operated without headlines in neighborhoods that needed infrastructure more than they needed attention. She also accepted an offer she had put off for 2 years, a position as creative director at a nonprofit design firm that produced accessible housing resources for low-income families. It paid considerably less than her old firm had. It mattered considerably more. Priya threw her a party the night the divorce finalized. Not a large party, just the people who had shown up during the hard months. Philip Hayes came, and Lewis Carver, and Walter Ashby from the Club Foundation, and Nora's sister flying in from Seattle, and a few colleagues from the new job who had become unexpectedly dear in a short time. They drank good wine in Nora's new apartment, smaller than the house, warmer than anything she'd shared with Miles, full of things she'd chosen for herself, and told stories about Margaret until it got late. She would have loved this, Philip said at one point, gesturing at the room. She would have told us to turn the music up, Priya said. She would have ordered better cheese, Nora's sister added. Nora laughed, and it was the real kind, the kind that starts in your chest and catches you off guard and reminds you that joy doesn't go anywhere. It just gets buried sometimes under weight that wasn't yours to carry. Miles had moved into a rental property from the estate. He and Colette had not, as far as Nora knew, resumed anything. She didn't look for information, and she didn't avoid it. It simply wasn't her concern anymore in the way it had once felt like it had to be. Deshawn. She stopped herself. That wasn't her story's name. What mattered was this. Miles showed up, eventually, to the first foundation dinner after the estate settled. Walter Ashby told her about it afterward, carefully. Miles had made a donation in Margaret's name, a real one, not a performative one. He asked about you, Walter said. Whether you were still involved. What did you tell him? That you were indispensable. Walter smiled. That Margaret would have insisted on nothing less. A year after the funeral, Nora stood at the back of a community design fair her team had organized in a Hartford neighborhood that hadn't had new housing resources in a decade. Families moved through booths with kids on their hips. Someone had brought a speaker playing Stevie Wonder loud enough to carry half a block. Priya appeared at her elbow with 2 cups of terrible event coffee. You look like Margaret, she said. Nora looked at her. Not physically. But, Priya gestured at the room. The way she used to stand at the back of things she built and just watch, happy in that quiet way. Nora thought about the envelope. About her name in Margaret's handwriting, underlined twice. About sitting alone in that cedar-scented office reading a letter from a woman who had loved her enough to plan 3 years ahead. She thought about the bank card still in her wallet, not because she needed the reminder Lewis was handling everything properly, but because it felt like carrying a piece of a person. You are stronger than you know. And you are loved. She gave me the courage, Nora said quietly. I just had to use it. Priya handed her the terrible coffee and they stood together watching the room, and outside the speaker was still playing and the afternoon light came through the windows at the exact angle that made everything look, just briefly, like something that had always been going to be fine.